So, Murphy had told him exactly where to be. They'd gone over it again and again. You go past the theater, said Murphy, and then the coffee shop and the shoe store, and then there's an alley on your right, and I go down the alley, said Sam. That's right, said Murphy. And there are 3 fire exits down there, said Sam, and I go past all 3 and around to the back, and as soon as I turn the corner, there's a door, said Murphy, on your right. It's a brown door, said Sam. Reddy brown, said Murphy. And I wait there, said Sam. I wait by the door. And that's where he was now, waiting in the alley behind the theater, beside the reddy brown door, although he would have described it as a rusty door himself. It was a Thursday. It was July, just about noon. The first features were an hour in. He wasn't supposed to be there for 20 minutes. He was early because he didn't want to be late. On the way over, he had run into Lila Douglas. Lila was Willow Cassidy's best friend. Willow was a girl in Sam's class. He hadn't seen Willow since school got out. Spent most of July trying to bump into her. Biking by places where girls might be, the pool, the park, the library. Nothing had worked. This afternoon, he was going to bike right by Willow's house, except Murphy had plans for him. There was a bang, and he jumped. The sound of metal against metal. One of the fire exits. An usher wearing a white shirt and a red jacket came around the corner carrying a big bag of garbage. He threw the bag in the dumpster. When the usher spotted Sam, he stopped and stared at him. Looked Sam up and down. So what Sam did was he turned and walked away in the opposite direction, as if he couldn't have cared less about the rusty door. He came back 5 minutes later. The coast was clear. So he knocked on the exit twice, like Murphy had told him, and he said the password softly. Open the pod bay door, Hal. Nothing happened. When the door finally did open, Sam almost missed it. In his defense, Murphy hardly cracked it. Anyone could have missed it. And in his defense, when he did notice, he played his part perfectly. He ran back to it, gave it a tug, and he slipped in. Well, okay. He forgot to check if anyone was watching. But no one was watching. So that worked out okay. And now he was inside, squinting in the dark theater hallway. Murphy nowhere to be seen. So Sam did what he was supposed to do. He turned left like he was supposed to and went down the hallway to the men's room. Murphy appeared 4 minutes later. He was holding out a ticket stub. He said, "Here, in case anyone asks." Sam gazed at the stub and smiled. Murphy grabbed both his shoulders, gave him a shake, and said, "Louie, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Sam, who didn't get the reference, put the ticket stub in his pocket and said, "That was amazing." An usher came out and everything. 5 minutes later, they were in the lobby, in the arcade at the back on the left, behind the candy counter. The side with all the pinball machines, not the driving games. Standing beside the claw machine, the crane. They're leaning against the glass case, staring at the pile of prizes, at the mountain of plush toys. "See," said Murphy. "See it?" Murphy was pointing at the very back. Sam was shaking his head. "Under the little panda," said Murphy. "Oh, there." Barely sticking out of the pile of stuffed animals, the corner of a Noriko 16. "It has the touch screen," said Sam, "and Nexus too." Murphy nodded. "My precious," he said. "My precious." Murphy had begun to circle the game. "We have to move the panda," said Murphy, "and probably the basketball. One of those miniature souvenir basketballs." Murphy, who had returned to the front of the machine, had his hands on the joystick. He was pushing it left and right. Murphy said, "We move that panda and the ball, we have a clear shot." Sam said, "No one ever wins these games. Never. They're rigged." Murphy said, "Yup, they're rigged. Difference between you and me and everyone else is I know how they're rigged." Murphy had been coming to the theater every day for a week. Instead of watching movies, Murphy had been studying the game. "It's a giant slot machine," said Murphy. "It's programmed. It pays off every 100 games. Every 100 games, the claw holds on. Rest of the time, it's programmed to drop the prize on the way to the chute. I'm waiting for the 100th game." Sam said, "So why do you need me?" Murphy said, "Well, you're going to guide me in. I still have to get the claw on the target. See the mirror on the back wall? I keep overshooting." And so they sat there, behind the candy counter and the pinball games where they could watch the game, and no one could watch them. Murphy had a paper. Every time someone played the game, he made a mark on his paper. "How much have you spent so far?" said Sam. "Well, that's hardly the point," said Murphy. "What's the point?" said Sam. "The point," said Murphy, "is getting a Noriko 16 for a quarter." "But you spent way more than a quarter already," said Sam. They were like a pair of detectives on a stakeout. And like detectives everywhere, they were starting to get on each other's nerves. It was 3 o'clock. Murphy looked at his paper. 63 down, he said. 37 to go. "This is ridiculous," said Sam. "It's called delayed pleasure," said Murphy. "And you just picked up the marshmallow. And as I've explained more than once, the ability not to pick up the marshmallow is an indicator of future success. In just about everything, you should restrain yourself." "I'm trying," said Sam. "Try harder," said Murphy. But it was hard. "What number are we at?" asked Sam. And he asked it once too often. "We're at the same number we were 5 minutes ago," said Murphy, peevishly. "Why don't you go watch a film? I'll come and get you when it's time." And so Sam stood up, and he walked away, and as he did, Murphy said, "Enjoy your marshmallow." And there he is now, in one of the cinemas, with his feet up on the chair in front of him, working on a box of buttered corn, using his tongue to pull it into his mouth, like a horse with a feed bag. Sitting there amongst the sticky mess of the ones who had been there before him, thinking that Murphy was right about movie theaters. They're the last place in the world where littering is socially acceptable. Sitting there waiting for the film to begin, wondering if he had time to get more butter, when out of the blue, Lila Douglas and Willow Cassidy waltzed in and sat down right in front of him. He brought his feet down and looked at the back of Willow's long, dark hair, and he said, "Of all the theaters and all of the complexes, in all of the towns, she walks into mine." He was pretty sure the girls hadn't spotted him, but as the lights dimmed, Lila turned and smiled. "Hey, Sam," said Lila, "what are you doing here?" And then the most unbelievable thing in the world happened. Lila Douglas and Willow Cassidy stood up. They stood up and they walked back and they sat beside him. He was at the movies, and there was a girl on either side of him. And the one on his right was Willow Cassidy. Out in the lobby, Murphy had finally made it into the 80s. He checked his watch. A couple of the theaters would be turning soon. He yawned. He stood up and stretched. With any luck, he'd hit 100 plays within the next half hour. Meanwhile, in the theater, Sam had stopped watching the movie. He and Willow were holding hands. Well, not technically holding hands. Their hands were touching. He's not sure when it began. He missed the transition from not touching to touching. But ever since he had noticed, he had stopped following the movie. Sam had never held a girl's hand before. Never, ever. Oddly, just before he noticed it, he'd been wondering how one might go about that. Did you ask? Did you say, "Do you want to hold hands?" Or did you just do it? And if so, how did you do it? And why didn't he know this? Surely everyone else knew this. He felt like an explorer making his way through a murky forest without a compass. How come he didn't have the compass? And that's when he noticed their hands were touching, ever so lightly. But touching, no doubt about it. Had he done this? He didn't mean to. Was it possible that his hand was acting as an independent agent? Or had Willow done it? He hadn't thought of that. And more importantly, now that he was aware of it, what should he do about it? What he wanted to do was move his hand closer, ever so slightly closer. Would that be harassment? He sensed that Willow was looking at him. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. Don't move a muscle. Just breathe. Keep your eyes on the screen and breathe. Breathe in. Breathe out. Lean forward. Concentrate. Maybe he should move his hand. Not far, but which way? Maybe away. So they weren't touching, but just a couple of centimeters away, so they were still in range. See if she followed. His whole body was tense. He'd stopped breathing again. He sucked in a lungful of air. Okay, wait, what was that? Something had just happened. What just happened? Willow had just said something. Willow Cassidy, who was sitting beside him in the theater, was talking to him. "Lila wants a drink," she said. "We'll be back in a moment." And the girls stood up. And Sam felt like everyone in the theater was looking at him. And so he leaned forward, his chin in his hands, thinking if he stared at the screen, they would lose interest. It seemed like an eternity before Willow returned. He didn't actually see her come back, just sensed her settle beside him. He didn't look, kept his eyes on the screen. But he had a plan. He was going to go for it. He was going to reach out and hold her hand. He was going to count to 5, and on 5, he was going to do it. 1. He began to move, moving his hand, intending to rest it on the arm of the chair. Why was he scratching his cheek? How did that happen? 2. Come on, move. 3. He dropped his hand down onto the armrest, and he felt Willow's hand move back. Hurry, hurry, he had to hurry. Don't let her get away. 4, 5, come on, do it. 6. He reached out and he grabbed Willow's hand. Oh my God, he did it. Oh no, she was trying to pull away. He tightened his grip. He had to let her know that he meant it. He was squeezing her hand as tight as he could. It worked. He could feel her relaxing. He was holding her hand. He was holding her hand. He was in a theater with Willow Cassidy and they were holding hand. He was, she was, they were. Okay, calm down. Something was happening. Willow was patting his arm with her free hand. What was that supposed to mean? What was he supposed to do now? He reached out and he did the same back to her. And now she was tapping his shoulder. Oh my gosh, they were making out. He was making out with Willow Cassidy. Oh, okay, not technically making out. Not yet. But they were about to any second now. He could feel it. He was about to get kissed. Sam had never been kissed before. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. All he could think was, why wasn't Murphy here to see this? Here we go, thought Sam. And he shut his eyes. And he turned towards Willow. I love you, he whispered. And then he leaned closer. And then he felt a hand on his face pushing him away. And he opened his eyes. And he was staring at Murphy. It was Murphy's hand he was holding. It was Murphy he was about to kiss. Sam yanked his hand free. He jumped up. Sorry, he said. And now everyone in the theater was looking at him. He sat down. Murphy reached out and put his arm around Sam's shoulder. Murphy pulled Sam close to him and whispered in his ear. Murphy said, it's okay. Love means never having to say you're sorry. Murphy said, come on, it's time. On their way out of the theater, they passed Willow and Lila coming in. Willow said, I got your popcorn. Are you leaving? Murphy affected his best Austrian accent and answered for him. Murphy said, he'll be back. And so they swanned back around the candy counter, back to the game that had brought them there. And Sam stood on the side the way they had practiced. Okay, he said, looking at Murphy. Okay, said Murphy. And then he smiled, and he rubbed his hands together, and he said, play it, Sam. And then Murphy said, after I put the quarter in, we have 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, the claw goes to the chute. It's automatic. And this is game 100, right? This is game 97, said Murphy. We have 3 practices. You ready? Sam nodded. Murphy put the first quarter in. Murphy said, the center of the claw should be right over the panda's neck. As he was talking, he pressed the joystick to the left. The claw began its jerky trip across the mountain of toys. Stop, said Sam. Back a bit. 20 seconds, said Murphy. Sam had his face pressed to the machine, his breath fogging the glass. Forward, said Sam. Back. 10 seconds, said Murphy. We're there, said Sam. We're home. Murphy said, there's no place like home. And then he took a step back and he held his hands in the air, palms out. Look at me. And the crane began its tricky descent. And the prongs flopped onto the panda. And they opened and closed and raised into the air, empty. 98, said Murphy, digging a quarter out of his pocket. And so, we must leave them. 2 boys in the midst of great adventure. They have changed positions. Sam is on the joystick. Murphy is spotting. And look, Willow and Lila are walking towards them. Pay attention, said Murphy. Murphy's face is pressed against the glass. The claw has begun to move. Not yet, said Murphy. Left. The girls are beside them now, standing by the machine, watching Sam's hands on the levers. Too far, says Murphy. Go back. When you get to the heart of any matter, everything is measured with a microscope. For at the heart of any matter, it is the small things that count. But when the thing you are measuring is the space between a boy's heart and a girl's heart, there is no microscope to measure that. Okay, said Murphy, you're there. Round up the usual suspects. Sam shook his head and gave the joystick one last touch. The claw shifted ever so slightly and then shuddered and began its descent. It's always the things that we can't have that we want. The prize behind the panel, the girl in the other room who doesn't know your name. Down the claw went. Down, down, down. I'll get you, my pretty, said Murphy. And your little dog, too. The claw flopped onto the belly of the bear and rested there for a moment. And then it started up again. This time it had the bear in its grip. This time the bear lifted unsteadily out of the pile of plush prizes and swung jerkily in the air. The four of them, the two boys and two girls, stared at it in wonder. Sam was beaming. The girls were clapping. Murphy was frowning. It wasn't supposed to work like this. The claw was supposed to drop the bear and clear the way for the next try. But it didn't drop it. The panda was swinging in the air. The claw was hovering over the chute. Sam looked at Willow shyly. Willow was beaming at him. Stories never end like this. The boy never wins the prize. The girl never gets the bear. But this one does. And Sam will tell it often over the years. The story about the afternoon he snuck into the movies, and he won the panda in the claw game, and he gave it to Willow Cassidy, and she kissed him on the cheek. I don't understand, said Murphy as they walked around the park after supper. I must have miscalculated or something. Something went horribly wrong. Nothing went wrong, said Sam. It was perfect. It worked out perfectly. And if you want, we'll go back tomorrow and do it again.